Happy New Year again, YouTube. Bill Faulkner with Faulkner Custom Rods coming to you with the second video about the Scott Throop Tiger Wrap or Holo Wrap. To recap, this style of wrap was developed by West Coast rod builder Scott Throop and capitalizes on an optical illusion called the moire effect. It was a very closely guarded secret for decades until it was published in Rod Maker Magazine, Volume 10, Issue 2. And I have completed a video on how to do your own Scott Throop Tiger Wraps. That video, which I'll link at the end, is called How to Complete a Throop Tiger Wrap the FCR Way, Part 1, the basics. But essentially, you wrap 2 or 3 threads in one direction, burnish creatively, and then coat with 3 or 4 coats of finish. And after that sets, you're going to wrap the same 2, 3, or 4 threads the opposite direction. Once again, burnish creatively. And then you're going to sacrifice or pull off all but one thread, and if you have done it right, you're going to be left with this striking wrap, the Scott Throop Tiger Wrap or Holo Wrap that gives movement, gives depth, and is almost dazzling, kind of hard to capture on camera, but here's the wrap we actually created in the first video. So that's the actual wrap that you saw me video and produce on a piece of scrap blank. So, you know, if you follow the steps, you should be able to get something like that. But what you're going to learn very quickly when you start working with these wraps is that they vary and you get variable results. And so today what I want to talk about is how we can work to minimize that variation. I also want to show you some tips and tricks and just call out a few details to help you sort of maximize the effect that you're looking for. So what you're seeing here is this is a size A 3-color tiger on a relatively small diameter blank, and of course I've already done the under wrap and I've already put 4 coats of finish on it, and so then I did my over wrap and burnished, and now here I'm going to reveal the wrap. And what I get here when I reveal is frankly not what I'm looking for. There's a lot of depth and there's a lot of movement because of having put 4 coats of finish on the under wrap. But to me, the pattern is very repetitive. If you see, it's almost like variable stripes or chevrons or something, and it looks very, very similar both on the top and the bottom of the rod, and it looks very similar all up and down the pattern. So there's no randomness, there's no kind of intensity or suddenness to it. And so to me, and again, it's all subjective, it's what you like, but this is a very boring tiger wrap. I don't like it. So I think one of the most important learnings that you can have with tiger wraps is if you get one like this that you don't like, you're not stuck with it. There's a solution. And what's the solution? Well, you're probably not going to love this, but it's pull it off and go again. And so here you see me unbinding the wrap and removing that last thread, same as I removed the sacrificial threads, and I'm going to be left with that base wrap with 4 coats of finish on it. And if you followed the instructions and you let that under wrap finish set for several hours, for a couple of days, it's going to be pretty hard, and it's not going to be difficult to remove this and start over. So when you remove the thread, and you see here I've got little ridges, I've got texture, and I can still sort of see the pattern from the tiger that I didn't like. And here's kind of a close-up. You can see those ridges. And here you can see them really close up. If you try to wrap over those ridges, what you may find is that you get the exact same wrap again because the thread goes right back in the same groove. So here's a little trick. If you'll take your heat gun, and this is on a low setting, and I can't keep it far enough from the rod and keep it on camera, but you can just see it every once in a while. I'm basically applying gentle heat with a constantly moving heat gun just to remove those thread ridges, and you can see the finish starting to gloss up again. And if your finish won't do this, then this is another reason to try Gen 4, but Gen 4 does it beautifully. It just wants to gloss up and leave you such a good finish. Now those ridges are completely gone. I can't see them, I can't feel them, perfect. And you can see that wrap is very high gloss and shiny again, and you can see here's a close-up and those ridges are all gone. So now we can wrap again. Same procedure as the last time, the same 2 or 3 threads wrapped in the opposite direction, then burnish again. So after we've let it set for a while, we're going to reveal again and see how it looks, and you can already see this one is much, much better. We have some irregular swirls and lava lamp movement, but then as we get into it, we start to get into a really regular pattern again. Close, No cigar, pull it off. And yep, we're starting to use a lot of thread at this point, and we've got a lot of time put into it. But the willingness to try these over is the difference between this boring ho-hum tiger and something that just pops off the rod like this. So once more into the breach, dear friends, and I show this for a couple of reasons. One is you need to understand that every single tiger you wrap is different. And so even with the same base wrap, when you make changes to the way you burnish, you will get a different wrap. And then the other reason is I frankly want you to see me struggle a little bit, because I worry that sometimes these videos make everything look perfect. They're condensed, and you know, there is no illusion or magic going on here. It's mostly hard work and practice. And so you can see this one took 3 tries. If it had taken 4 tries, so be it. 5 tries, whatever. The key is just do something different every time with your burnishing. You need to, definition of insanity, if you want a different outcome, you need to do something differently. And so either burnish more, burnish less, just burnish differently so that you're sure that you're rewarded for your effort by getting a different outcome. So finally, how'd we do? Will the 3rd time be the charm? So after letting it set for a while, again, we go to remove, and now we're getting happy. This is kind of the look that I like. So the point of sharing this with you and showing you this very real exercise on a real rod is not necessarily to tell you what a tiger should and shouldn't look like. Let your eye decide what you're happy with. You might like a very regular, repetitive pattern. I personally don't, but you know, that's why they make chocolate and vanilla. Do it however you like. Just understand that if your under wrap is set, it's there, it's got 4 coats of finish, it's not going to change. If you are unhappy with your result, redo it. Go again. You can be unhappy with the color. You can be unhappy with the pattern. Just pull it off. The worst thing you've done is burn thread, which is one of the cheapest parts of this whole process. So to me, it's worth burning a little thread to get a wrap that you're really happy with, like this one. So in addition to understanding that if you're unhappy, you can go again, let's talk through some other kind of tips and tricks and techniques you can use. So one really important one is thread size. So generally you're going to get your best, most consistent results using all size A for under and top wrap, or all size D for under and top wrap, but understand that they both have their place and they give you a slightly different effect. So here are 2 identical black and silver tigers. Size A is on the left, size D is on the right. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's sort of high res versus low res. The size A is more granular, kind of like a higher res and sort of crisper in a way. And the D is sort of smokier and more nebulous, but they both can look really good, right? And so here's a size D reveal, and sorry, this stiff size D metallic thread gets a little messy, but you can see you can absolutely get a gorgeous tiger with size D, but it's just got a different look to it. So here again this is size A, and this is most of the work we've done. It looks fairly normal, and now we switch to size D, and it's just sort of coarser and less specific, and you get sort of a different type of movement. You get tons of depth if you use 4 coats of finish on your under wrap, and it's really attractive. I like it, and so just experiment, try both, and know that that's one way you can change the effect you're getting is by changing the thread size that you use. Another trick or variable we can use is the type of thread. So remember that nylon is transparent and will get sort of translucent when it gets wet, whereas no CP thread is an opaque textile and will remain opaque. When you use NCP versus regular nylon as your overwrap, or the thread you leave behind and don't sacrifice, you're able to get different effects. So how do we use those effects? Well, if you remember, as a kid, if you only had a few crayons, you weren't stuck to 4 colors. You could blend colors and get different combinations. And so one of the most interesting techniques was taught to me by a rod builder from Brazil back in 2007, Jorge Pozaban. And Jorge taught me how you can use multiple primary colors in the base coat with a good combining color in the top coat, and you wind up with using 3 threads but getting 5, 6 colors. So use your imagination and let the sky be the limit. But in this wrap, we use red, blue, and yellow NCP as an under wrap, and regular nylon royal blue over the top. And the red and blue combine to create purple, the yellow and blue combine to create green, and you wind up with wrapping 3 threads, which is manageable, but getting 6 or 7 colors, which is a neat effect. Of course, the other way to control how many colors you get is to use a different number of threads. So in this picture, you see from left to right, 2-thread base and overwrap, in the middle a 3-thread base and overwrap, and on the right a 4-thread base and overwrap. And the more threads you add, the more difficult it gets to wrap them without flaw or defect. But you bring in more colors, you get more effects, you're able to use more combinations of threads. So I would encourage you to experiment with different sizes. Here we see a 3-thread tiger on the left and a 4-thread tiger on the right. And you can kind of see the way the spacing changes the effect and how it looks. All that is to say, it gives you some opportunities to create neat effects. I know not everybody has a lathe that will wrap 3, 4, 5 threads at a time, but it's worth experimenting with because it definitely gets you a different look. Another variable to be mindful of is blank diameter, and I don't think anyone talks about this one, but in my experience, the smaller the diameter of the blank, the more challenging it is and the less forgiving it is to get the results you want, right? So here's 2 nearly identical tigers on a very thin blank on the left and a thicker blank on the right. And as you saw earlier in the video, it took 3 tries to get an acceptable finish on the very small diameter slow pitch jigging blank on the left. Both of these larger diameter blanks, we got a great effect with the very first try. And in my experience, that's pretty typical. So the larger diameter blanks also give you the ability to really burnish on 3 or 4 axes instead of just 2. So again, neither good nor bad, just be aware that it is a little bit more challenging to do on a smaller diameter blank. Now you only need to see some really gorgeous tigers on ice rods to know it can be done on very small diameter blanks, but just be aware of that challenge and don't get frustrated. All right, so let's get into a couple of key tips and tricks here. So obviously in doing tigers, we're gonna use a lot of thread, especially if we're gonna go to the extra effort to get it right. So do yourself a favor and go find some old empty spools. These are old wooden sewing spools, but you can buy new spools from a place like Mudhold that are plastic, or you can just hold on to the ones you use. And when you're sacrificing threads, you can do it one at a time, and you can keep those high value threads that you don't want to get rid of. So I think particularly about my Gudabroad HT Electro Metallics that are discontinued, won't be made anymore, and I think about the Hytina Aurora metallic threads. I hate to throw them away. So by using these spools and by pulling the thread off one at a time instead of all at once, you can sort of wind them onto a spool and keep them. And even your NCPs and trim colors you can keep. And very often you're going to wind up using them as a complementary color in your build. And this just helps you not throw away as much thread. And so now maybe the most important and helpful trick. You see right here in the middle of this big D tiger that's otherwise gorgeous, we have a flaw. And I've talked about this before, but these things are very intolerant of flaws. So let's talk about how you might fix it. And I'm hampered here because I normally would use magnification to try to do this, and my magnification is holding my camera. But you get a flaw like this because the gap is interrupted on one side or the other. It's too skinny on one side, it's too thick on the other. So if you have a good packing tool with a narrow nose, you can try to just move it one way or the other, and sometimes you can salvage it. Another great trick that has helped me, the best way to solve these problems is not to create them, to go very slowly and to carefully remove your sacrificials. But if you get one, try using a piece of thread the size of what you had in the gap and just almost flossing. And you can see there, because I waited before I pulled my overwraps off and there was a little bit of a ridge or a groove there, I could just pop it right back in place and it's fixed. Again, it's best to go slow and just avoid these in the first place, but if you find yourself with one, that's your one chance to fix it. And if that doesn't work, you're going to need to pull it off and go again. So one final thing for consideration, and I've covered this in the Dragon Skill videos, but I do sometimes use finish additives with these tigers, particularly over the first coat of epoxy over my under wrap or base wrap, I will sometimes use very fine grain, very high quality automotive grade flakes or glitter, and they can add some really interesting effects. Be careful, use them in moderation. A little bit goes a long way, but they give you a little something different. So don't be afraid to experiment with that. And there's even products like glow pigments that can be used to create really neat effects for rods that are used at night. So the possibilities are endless. These are just a couple that have worked well for me. All right, so that does it for part 2. Thanks very much for watching. Please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for one final Tiger video. I'm hoping to get us a couple of very special guests, so stay tuned. Thanks.